Hey everyone, Joe here. In this video, I'm going to show you in 7 steps the best way to prepare your tracks for mixing. So if you've recorded your song at home, or maybe you've recorded it in a studio and you're going to be sending it off to get mixed, this is how you can best prepare for that. So the mixer doesn't leave anything off, so they know what kind of sound you want. You'll get a bit of mix out of it, and also it won't delay the mixer, so you'll probably end up getting your mix back to you sooner, which is always a good thing. These 7 steps are going to take you right from where you finished your recording right to where you send your tracks off, so make sure you don't miss any of them. And then next week we're going to be going over how to prepare your mixes to be sent off for mastering. If it's already out, I'll leave a link on the screen now, but just hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss that one. Get your tracks edited. So this isn't the job of the mix engineer, it's the job of either the recording engineer or yourself if you've recorded yourself. It's basically just getting everything exactly how it should be. You don't want to be sending anything to the mixer that you don't want in the final song. So if there are little clicks and pops and breaths that you don't want in the final song, just get those cut out. You can see in this mix here, I've done a lot of vocal editing. This is before any mixing. Any count-ins as well on the drums, you can go ahead and cut those out if you don't want them in there. You just want to be sending the stuff off that you want in your final record, no more, no less. That also means when you're listening through, you find out there's a take that you're not quite happy with, just get it re-recorded. It's best to record as though there is no mixing. Okay, so yes, there are things that your mixing engineer can do if it's too late, little tweaks and things to try and fix things up the way you want them, but ideally the best mixes are the ones that have been recorded fantastically to begin with. You can also add in fade-ins if you know you want your fade to end at a certain point, but I'm sure your mix engineer will be happy to do that for you otherwise. But generally, most editing is to be done by whoever recorded it, or if you have a dedicated editor. Some mixing engineers will do editing for you. I personally do for my clients if that's what they need, but it's something you need to agree beforehand. Step 2 is naming the tracks. All your tracks need to be named in a logical way. This is one of the most important things in speeding up the process for the mix engineer, just so they know exactly what they're getting. So for example, you take this track here, it's generally named quite well. You've got the bass called bass, and you know, guitar lead called guitar lead, and so on. But then when you've got things like here, main, you'd want to give that a name that no one's going to understand that. You want to give that a name that your engineer will understand. So vocal 1 is fine, and then vocal 2, and so on. Now you could, if you've got a number of artists in the band and your mixing engineer knows your band personally, you could put the names in there as well, but that should come after you've named the instrument itself. Also, feel free to put a number in front of each track. So in order, there we go, a number for every track, but try and keep this the same across the board. So for example, if in this track bass is number 10 and it comes after the vocals, straight after the vocals, try and keep it similar for the other songs. It means that the mixing engineer can see the order and see everything that's there really easily and quickly. And then when you come to consolidate and join up your audio, because more on that in the next step, it will take on whichever name you've called the track. At least it does in Pro Tools. I'm sure it does on most DAWs as well. But that brings us on to step 3, which is to consolidate the tracks. So if you're unsure, to consolidate your tracks means basically just to join them all up. So on Pro Tools, you can select everything by clicking one end, holding Shift, clicking the other end, and then it will select all those edits, and then with an Alt, Shift and 3, or you can go into the menu and click Consolidate Clip, it's going to start joining all the tracks together so that we're not needing to send the engineer loads of different bits that they've got to piece together. Also, at this stage, you want to make sure around here, zoom in, make sure it's starting right at the beginning. You don't even want sort of a few milliseconds out, because when your engineer loads those up into their DAW, they're going to all start from the beginning by default. And if you've missed off a small section at the beginning of one of the tracks, it means it's going to be shifted back and will be out of time. So you can see here that that's joined those tracks up, and they've also taken on the track name that we gave it, which makes it easier for us as well. When means we don't have to go into Finder or Explorer and rename them all manually. And then again, you can see below, now that I've chopped off this counting, I'm going to have to consolidate that. Now, don't worry about the silence at the end. You can always get rid of that if you like. So we can start from there, go right to the beginning and over that silence and consolidate again. And there you go. That will put a brand new file into our folder called Open Hi-Hats with that counting gone. And just looking in Windows Explorer here, you can see that those files have been created. So normally what I'll do is consolidate all the tracks at once, which means when you filter by date created, you're going to have them all at the top just to grab quickly and chuck in the folder for the engineer. Step 4 is to keep your tracks dry, or at least as dry as you can. They may have been recorded with some effects, some guitar pedals and things like that on the way in. That's absolutely fine if that's your chosen tone. But in terms of plugins, if you've done a rough mix yourself, best to leave those off and let the mixing engineer work their magic. If there's a very specific effect that you really like, you can leave that on, let the engineer know. But particularly in terms of compression and EQ, it's best for that to be left for the mixing engineer. Now, if you have put an effect on, for example, if we put just as an example, let's say a chorus on a lead guitar, consolidating, at least in Pro Tools, is not going to save that. It's not going to print that chorus to the track. So you would need to bounce that down as you would a full song. So you'd need to bounce that to disk as a separate track. Which brings me on to my 5th step, which is get the formats right. So if we're bouncing that down, for example, bounce to disk, we want to keep the bit depth and the sample rate in particular exactly the same as it was in the original audio. So you don't want to be increasing the sample rate, converting here, or decreasing it either, because it can affect the audio negatively. You just want to leave it as it is, and then any sample rate conversion and bit depth conversion is normally left for the mastering engineer, so not even the mixing engineer is likely going to be messing around with that. Also, you want it in WAV, ideally. AIFF works. I just go for WAV for its compatibility. And if it's in mono, then give the mixing engineer a mono track. And if it's in stereo, give them a stereo track. Now, for something like a kick, that's been recorded in mono. I've received this as stereo, but it's actually a mono track. So if I was going to mix this, I'd have to go in, split to mono, delete one of those. It's easier when you're bouncing down, just to make sure that you've got it set as mono if you're bouncing down a mono signal. Otherwise, it just duplicates it, increases the file size, it slows down the mixing engineer as well. Probably the only tracks that you're going to be bouncing down in stereo are going to be keyboards that recorded with stereo out, possibly overheads and room mics, although you could do those in separate mono. But yeah, most tracks are going to be bounced down in mono. Step 6 is to take some notes and just drop them in a text file and add them into the folder that you send off to the mix engineer. So if you're sending a whole album, then you can get a few notes of each song. So the song name, the BPM, and then the sample and bit depth. This is probably going to be the same across the whole album. But just these bits of information really help the mix engineer just get started quickly. And also it stops any issues with conversion, sample rate conversion, things like that, to avoid any loss of quality. The BPM as well, if you want delays and things like that, other time-based effects on your track, then having the BPM in there is really important to get those in time. And then a few notes about the sound, if you haven't already discussed this, what kind of sound you're going for. Maybe if you're after a certain effect on a certain track, then you can make a note of that. And also any miscellaneous things, any discrepancies with the file names between tracks, or if you want a certain certain kind of fade an area, or if there was a little bit that you really just couldn't edit and you're just asking the mix engineer if they wouldn't mind taking a look, then yeah, just as much information as possible really, just to help the mix engineer get that sound that you're after. And we're almost there now, but this one is important. It's step number 7. Get everything organized into separate folders. It's going to be very confusing for the engineer if they receive a folder that's just full of like 9-10 songs and you've got 9 different bass tracks. So just get them all into each individual folder, named as the song that they're for. And then you can get that parent folder zipped up to save space and get it on whichever yours and the mix engineer's preferred file transfer services. And those are the 7 steps. If you follow those 7 steps, then both you, the band, and the mixing engineer are going to have a much easier time. It's going to be quicker, it's going to be easier, and it's going to help you to get the sound out of your mixing engineer that you're after. If you have any questions, or if you feel like I've missed anything, just leave those in the comments section below, and hit that subscribe button for more mixing and recording tips and tricks every single week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.